Good afternoon and welcome back to another podcast with Mason. My name's Mason, as I just said, and this is the Mason Speaks podcast with Lachlan Werner. How you doing today, Lachlan?
Yeah, good, thank you. Yeah,
Good,
just
good to hear, good to hear.
slow sunny day, which is nice for a Wednesday.
Yeah, it's unusual for a sunny day to come out this early
Yeah,
in the year in England, but here we are. We can't complain. Saying that, we'll be
no,
complaining if it's too hot. So,
yeah.
Lachlan, a lot of people who are watching the video are gonna probably already know who you are, partially because we're from the same area. A lot of people watching it are also from the same area, but partially because you're actually making quite a decent name for yourself in the world of comedy. Do you want to tell everyone sort of a little bit about yourself, just generally, and what it is that you do?
Yeah, so I'm I always actually really struggle with this. I feel like it's like I'm in the weirdest like non-boxed thing
It's a
of
bit of
like
a
so
niche, isn't
many
it? It is
things.
a bit of a niche. It's
Such a
quite
niche thing.
specific that what you're doing.
Yeah, so I'm a ventriloquist and physical comedian and clown and theatre maker. That's kind of all of the things, I guess. But yeah, overall, people probably know me for being a ventriloquist.
And the ventriloquism is something that you've done for years. I mean, I remember you doing ventriloquism at school. Anyone who doesn't know, Lachlan was a few years above me at the school we went to, and I remember you doing it in shows and all sorts, and you're phenomenal now, and even phenomenal then, and even better now. Is that
Oh, thank you.
something that's all right? Is that something that you've done from a very young age, or was it something you picked up sort of later in your?
It's something like, yeah, I've done ventriloquism since I was seven, which is really, it is mental when I think about it. It is like quite a scary, and I mean, it's really crazy, like talking to anyone who went to school with me because I think it makes me aware of how long I've done it for, which then is like, okay, this is not something. No, I don't think anyone really actually thought I was going to make this my job, maybe including me. So it is like really crazy then to be like, oh yeah, that's like 10 years ago and I'm still doing it. And like, yeah, it's a bit mad. But yeah, I started doing that when I was really young. And then the kind of comedy world kind of opened up to me a bit later when I was kind of in my teens, and that yeah, I went and studied clown when I was 18, and that's kind of where the very niche pocket of what I
Mm.
do has come from, I guess, is from that world.
So where you say you studied clown? What do you mean by that? Where did you study that?
I went to a school in France called L'École Philippe Gaulier, which is kind of I guess it's like the kind of hub of clown. It's kind of where you go if you people from all around the world kind of go to learn clown from this old man, this very old man who it, famously he kind of just bangs a drum and tells you that you're shit until you're funny. That's kind of the training that I had. And yeah, I did that when I was 18, and I did it for like 2 years. And uh yeah, I did that instead of going to university or getting any kind of formal training. So that is literally like the extent of my education is truly an old man negging me.
Well, I mean, it's testament to the fact that you put your all into it. You instead of going and doing the sort of social standard of finish high school, go to college, finish college, go to uni, get your degree, go get a job, work down to five, simple as that. Pay taxes, and then that's it. But what you did was you invested in yourself, you backed yourself to go and make something of it, and well, it's working out pretty well for you now, wouldn't you say?
Slowly but surely, yeah. It's been like I think also because I left the school right when the pandemic hit. So it's it's a big relief like in the last sort of year and a half that it's finally started kind of, being something that's viable in any way because of, everything kind of takes it does take a long time, I guess, to build that name for you, like to get anyone interested in what you're
Mm.
doing. It's yeah, I guess I feel like I was a bit delayed in doing it because of the pandemic, and it's so yeah, it feels like a big relief that it's like, okay, that was a worthwhile choice,
Yeah,
and
no,
that it's okay that I don't have a degree.
I could totally imagine because I mean, the thought of going to France, studying for 2 years, doing something that most people haven't even. I mean, I'd never heard of a school of clown because
Yeah.
by what you don't, or do you mean I'm presuming you don't mean like clown as in big wig, red nose, and that sort of stuff. It's the physical comedy that you
Right,
isn't
yeah.
it?
Not yeah, it's not that. Yeah, I should sort of clarify what I mean by clown. It's kind of the theatre form of clown, which is yeah, it's more to do with it's more kind of this tradition of the idiot within every person, and this thing of it sort of being like you have to find the thing that is very distinctly funny about you.
Right.
And it's almost the opposite of stand up in some ways, because it's like where stand up is being funny using your wit and intellect in any way, or or relatability or any of that kind of stuff. It's like the opposite of that. It's like what is uniquely stupid about you, and can you make people laugh and love you for that, and not rely on words or cleverness, and just be kind of this like open fool who people kind of love. I guess that's pretty much
Yeah.
it.
So it's almost the different, and in the nicest possible way. With it's almost the difference between a stand-up comedian is you're laughing with them, whereas the idea of the clowning is
Yeah,
you're literally laughing at them, aren't you? Because
yeah.
that's the
It
idea.
is a lot more vulnerable, I think,
Yeah, I can
and I
imagine.
mean now I kind of do a bit more of a blend of both. I not completely, but I sort of I wouldn't say that the work I do is kind of. I say this because there's a lot of purists about clown, actually. There's a lot of people who will come to my shows and be like, well, that's not clown because you're not following all of the rules of clown.
Right.
And, you're not kind of, and there are parts where actually there's stuff I'm doing that is like a bit heady and a bit clever, and,
Yeah.
relies a bit more on writing and things like that. So I guess it's, now I do a bit more of a blend, but pure clown I think is kind of from training in it, and having done other styles of performance as well, and trained in acting and stuff as well, and other bits and bobs. Like I think clown is like the most vulnerable thing that you can do on stage, because it's just like relying only on yourself and just nothing else.
You're just putting it all out there for people to either like it or not, I suppose.
Yeah,
Go-
yeah.
Going back to what you said about the pandemic and how you'd finished, so you finished the course, boom, pandemic hits, world goes into a standstill. What's your thoughts? What do you think at that point? You think I've just gone to France, spent 2 years here, and now I don't know if I'm going to be able to go and perform anywhere.
Yeah, pretty much. It was like a really scary thing of I just moved to Bristol when the pandemic hit, and I'd like started kind of gigging on the comedy circuit in Bristol, and cabaret circuit in Bristol, and kind of starting to kind of have a name, and um people were kind of liking what I was doing, and but I was also I do a lot of stuff in my work where I really play with the audience as well, and like it's a lot of like physically touching people and all sorts of like yeah, really interactive stuff, which suddenly it was almost like I think a lot of us who do kind of alternative comedy and do a lot of stuff that relies on the audience, we suddenly kind of went, oh my god, we're maybe never going to be able to do that ever
Yeah.
again, actually. And it was like a really crazy thing of like I spent a lot of the pandemic being like, I just don't even think ventriloquism particularly translates to like social media or screen that well. And it was like
Mm.
a really big thing of going like, oh my god, I really think the liveness of what I do is like quite essential in it having any like anything exciting about it, really. So it was I mean it was good in some ways. It did force me to really expand the skills. It was great in a way because I just left with a bunch of skills from this school, and then suddenly had to learn a whole new toolkit of schools of skills in in social media, in
Mm.
like, trying to figure out ways to do comedy without an audience, and think about kind of it did force me to think outside the box in a lot of new ways, which I think again now those things are paying off a lot more. I think it's like a thing where a little bit later down the line I'm now getting opportunities to write things for screen and things like that, and suddenly those skills are becoming more like, yeah, okay, I did actually learn how to do this on, you know, while filming myself in my room in
Yeah,
2020, and actually now this has become a useful skill again. And yeah, it's kind of, yeah.
it's a vital bit of learning that I suppose you went through, because everything changed. Nothing was the same as the lockdown. The day lockdown, that's March 23rd, 2020, was a complete opposite day to March 22nd, 2020,
Yeah.
and everything changed. So when we went through that process as a globe, and people found individual things that they had to adapt to and had to learn, you did that and you did it well. And that's not me trying to blow smoke up your ass or anything, but that's just true. You did do it well, because
Thank you.
it's taken you to where you are now. And I mean, you said about having to use social media. You've got just shy of 5,000 followers on Instagram. You're verified. You know, people do know who you are. So in a way, obviously the pandemic was a horrible thing, but your personal experience through it, and that was just solely in that respect of how you managed to adapt to it. I mean, that's got to
Mm.
come as a positive, I
It's
suppose.
definitely a positive. I mean, I it's a funny thing where now I sometimes feel slightly resentful of being, this is going to sound really ridiculous, but I think in some ways I'm now slightly resentful of being as good at marketing as I am, because I think it's a weird double-edged sword where you then, in being the, it's like, you know, in being both the artist and the salesperson, you sometimes get, those lines get very, very blurry sometimes, and
Yeah,
you almost have
yeah,
to shut out the part of you that is thinking about how you're going to sell something in order to fully, like, immerse yourself in just the creative process and be like, I have to be able to experiment, and I have to be able to go for things that are going to not work in order to find what
mm,
does work. You do have to slightly shut out the part of you that's this, like, producer, I guess, that's going like, yeah, but how are we going to package this? How are we going to, like, sell this to a wide audience and blah blah blah? Like, because that's not really actually useful in the creative process. That's something that sort of needs to come later. Once you know what the thing is that you're sharing, then it's important later to go, okay, now how are we going to make this feel accessible and sell it to lots of people and blah 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 blah, I
so
guess. But
so do you feel that the way that you try and go about it, at least, is you make something that you like, you think other people will like, and then once you've made it, once you've perfected it, then it's time to write, switching heads, switching hats. Now I'm the marketing guy. How on
yeah.
earth am I gonna get this across? So no matter what it is that's been put in, 'cause for example, if you it was two people, if you were the comedian, ventriloquist, and someone else was the producer, you'd go to them with this, and this is what I got, and they'd find a way. I suppose that's the difficulty when it's you yourself doing both things, is it's like you say, trying to separate them. And do you find that you are able to separate them, or is there always something in the back of your mind saying, I need to adjust this for that reason?
I guess it's like that, there's a really nice, like, thing that Stephen King says when he's, like, writing, that's about how you write the first draft with the door shut, and it's just, you're telling yourself the story first, and then later drafts is about, then you're writing for other people, and you're thinking more about, okay, you open the door to the first person who you would show your first draft to, which is probably, like, in his case, he always says it's his wife, or, it's someone that's really close to you that you want to share it with. And then you open it a bit further, then you open, so I guess that, like, that is what I try to do in some ways, is the thing of being like, okay, I'm thinking very specifically about myself, but also the audience that I already know I'm making things for. That's, like, kind of, to me, feels quite essential to be thinking from the start to some extent about who it's actually for. Um, and then later on, I guess, yeah, then you switch into a slightly more marketing
Yeah,
brain, where you go, okay, how do we make this feel like it's for everybody a little bit
yeah,
more, and, like, kind of, yeah, feel like it's for a wider audience. And I mean, I've been really surprised by the last show that I did, the show that I'm now kind of touring, and the one that I did in Edinburgh last year. I've been really surprised by how many different people do like it, because I think in my mind I was like, this is a show for probably predominantly queer audiences and people who have this very niche, you know, maybe who like this type of niche comedy. And actually, like, it's been really interesting to see how many people do really respond to it and are like, it's actually just fun for everyone. Like, it's kind of just a fun show for as many people as possible. So that's kind of, it's nice that people can get work on levels, I guess, as well. That some people will get what you're really trying to do as an artist, and other people will just enjoy it, you know, as something that they enjoy. And yeah, I guess that's the mindset you have to switch into later, I guess, is going, how do we make people know that they will enjoy this, even if at first it doesn't look like something that they would buy a ticket to.
Yeah, definitely. I think, and as you mentioned, the different levels in which people receive what you do at, because on first glance, you think it's funny, it's a bit silly, a bit goofy. It's very different to a lot of other things that you see. But I can imagine from what you've said, and from knowing you from how things are. I mean, you're very, you have very valid, and you're not worried about having an opinion on things. Is what I'm trying to say. And I would imagine that whether consciously or subconsciously, you try and portray messages that you believe yourself through your shows. Is that something you could sort of agree with?
Yeah, I think so. I think I don't often think about maybe the message first. I'm not someone who writes from a place of like really having something to say, but I'll often know vaguely what it is that I want to say. I'll kind of know that there's a particular thing that I'm feeling, you know, something that I want to respond to, or something that, you know, I'm, yeah, having some kind of emotional response to it. And then I'll just try to leave that in the back of the brain while playing,
Yeah,
basically. It'll be a thing where then I'll try to find the silliest way to play a game that is in some way related to that thing. And then it's kind of quite a slow burn process in a way, because it is quite late on, I suppose, that the message fully makes sense to even me. And
yeah.
I'm like, oh, okay, this is a show about this. And now I know to kind of rewrite, you know, like to do the kind of later drafts with that theme more at the forefront of what I'm doing. Um, but I find that the best way to even know what it is you want to say is to not necessarily try to say it, and just
It'll come through naturally in a lot of when you're sorry to interrupt you, but like I
no,
think
no.
going off from what you said, it come when you've got something so strong in your mind, whether you're thinking, how do I get this to it, or if you're just letting it come through, because your mind will give you ideas on purpose, thinking that'll represent this. Yeah, it's not something that you think, right, I can do this, and everyone will know that this is what I mean.
Yeah,
Just by way of your performance and what you draft and what you come up with, eventually, I mean, even sometimes you might look back on it and think, you know what, I can tell that at this time when I was writing this, that's what I was focusing on a lot.
yeah. And even, and like I say, I suppose even I guess I never want to do anything that feels heavy-handed in terms of messages as well, because I think it is something where will always prefer for it to be something where people can enjoy it on those levels, and people can, like, it is kind of a nice thing with the last show. I kind of feel like I say, there's a sort of group of people who really love it, who will walk away and go, the themes of kind of queer liberation and owning your own voice and your own body, that really speaks to me. And but then there's other people who will just leave and be like, that was so fun, and the ventriloquism was impressive, and it was really upbeat, and like, and I kind of am okay with people getting what they get from it, and it not being necessarily a show that people go, oh, that's made me really like think about this thing. It's kind of
Mm.
okay with, I'm kind of okay with it being like, there's layers to the experience of what people take from it.
Which is actually in terms of society nowadays, without trying to get too deep onto it, is so important to have something that one people can just go and enjoy. Something that someone can go and just forget about any troubles that are in their life currently and just go and have a good time. But conversely, it's also a really pertinent time for people to understand, like you said about liberation, your own voice, your own body. Now, in my opinion, more than ever is important in the world of social media, where everything is broadcast, everyone has an opinion on everything. Being able to stop, take a step back for a second, and say, "Look, this is me. This is who I am. This is what I want to do." It's so important, especially now.
Yeah, yeah. I feel really, I mean, that's been, I suppose, on the flip of what I've just said about, like that I do want people to enjoy it on those levels, which is really exciting. I think the thing that pulls me back to doing it again and again is more that audience who really get it on all of the levels, and that is like something which I think there's been times where I've really not wanted to keep doing it, honestly, because I think sometimes that the comedy industry itself can be really ugly, like any sector of the arts. It can
Mm.
be an ugly competitive place, and I'm not really a competitive person, which is really funny given just how much I keep kind of accidentally throwing my hat into competitive rings and being like, all right, up for another award that I now have to push to try to, like, all those kind of things. And but it's really not what makes me want to do it, that kind of hierarchy, I guess, of people doing well in it. So that the thing that really does pull me back, I think, is knowing that there's a little audience who really love it, and who feel that it's comedy specifically for them. I think there's a nice thing about going like, oh, there's an audience who feel that this is comedy being made for them, and that no one else is necessarily doing something that is so directed at this
Mm.
audience, and that is saying like, I'm being silly and stupid in a way that also traditionally, like, the clown thing itself is historically almost entirely dominated by like straight men and white men, and so it's it feels, I think, like a really interesting moment in time that there are loads of women, queer people, people of color coming through doing this like really silly, stupid comedy that doesn't feel like it has to be about talking into a microphone about your identity, and actually you can
Mm.
talk about your identity and experience through playing and stupidity. And that's like I think that's a really powerful thing that's like happening right now, that we're kind of reclaiming that space that feels like it's historically been for straight men, where they can do whatever they like, they can
Mm.
be Mr. Bean can come out and be as funny as he wants, because he's like the idea of a neutral
Yeah.
man. Yeah,
Yeah.
the idea of like neutrality being this like straight white man. So I guess that's a space that is for them, and I think it now feels like there's this big, slowly but surely, this big switch where it's more and more people who are not that, um, saying, actually, I want to make comedy for people like me that is in the same way just really joyful.
And that's such a nice way of going about things, because eventually the mold has to break on everything. There's nothing that throughout all of time will stay the same, because as a society we adapt, we evolve, we change, and to be so progressive in the thought processes that are going on nowadays, it's important that we do break the mold, that we do change things, whether they're little things, whether they're huge, large scale operations, and things that have to be cracked for it to, cracked, broken, whatever you want to call it, for it to work. And a lot of people aren't going to like that to start off with, but
Mm.
eventually it'll heal, it'll get better, and people will start to just enjoy it for what it is, which is the comedy. But secondly, it's also it's a statement of intent. It's saying, look, we're here. This is part of society.
Yeah.
Get on
I
board with it,
think
kind of
people are
thing.
really surprised when they realize that, because it does, I understand, it is like you said earlier, it's there's this conversation on social media which just isn't like, actually just isn't reflective of real real humans in any way. And there is this thing where it's like, I think that's why for me doing live work still feels like the most exciting and powerful space, because it feels like it is a way of bringing together people who are of all different backgrounds and making them go, oh, this is just funny. Oh, okay, I see. This is just still like, right, this is not actually about, there's no need to even think about our differences. If we're all laughing together at something, then like
It's funny.
like that is funny. That's all it is. Like we don't need to think too much about who the person is doing it. And I guess it helps you overcome, like you say, it helps in some ways that it feels like you're breaking new ground, and you're kind of saying, oh, this is radical because I'm not the body that you're used to seeing on stage doing that thing. But I think at the same time, yeah, it's like a lot of people, I think, relax very quickly in a live space when they realize that they do know how to just laugh at something that's funny, and it doesn't really matter who it is on stage doing the thing. And yeah, it's just kind of, it's everything is, I think that a big problem in comedy is that everything's quite slow with stuff translating from the live world to TV, and that feels like that's kind of a big, we're at a very different place in terms of who's getting onto telly, or who's getting the kind of slightly bigger things from this kind of clown alternative world. It is still, unfortunately, a lot of the like straight men who are the ones like breaking through to the bigger stuff. And I think that that is slightly telling that the mainstream, which is telly, is still a bit less ready to like expand
Yeah.
what they can see as comedy for everybody, I guess.
Yeah. And that's, we can only hope is something that sooner rather than later is changed, because the amount of people I would imagine in the LGBTQ community that don't feel like what's on mainstream media relates as much to them as it
Mm,
could.
mm,
I mean, that's got to be harmful to people's mental well-being. And when you think you're not represented, you're a large part of the community, but you're not represented in mainstream media. I mean, and that must be quite upsetting for people of any age who are going through that sort of realization of who they are.
yeah, I think so. I think especially, well, it's interesting being from Worcester and being from somewhere that's not, that doesn't have, because I suppose the difference between, and I sort of see this because of being on the stages of kind of the London queer cabaret scene and stuff like that as well. And that, I suppose it's crazy seeing the difference between what young people have there in terms of community versus in more rural places. And that's kind of, yeah, that's where I think the mainstream and yeah, TV and representation, it's more harmful in letting down people who aren't in, who aren't based somewhere where there's community, because
Mm,
that is like, that's where you need to see it most. Is you kind of need, and you know, that is where the internet is now actually a really powerful. That is where it's now like a really good thing, because there is now a sense of community for younger people online. And yeah, I mean, it's been interesting having like more followers on Instagram and stuff, because it is like a thing of knowing that quite a lot of them are like younger queer people, and
mm.
going like, oh my God, what would I have done if I had been like their age and seen this on Insta? Like it's kind of mad, like knowing that there was no one really
Mm.
that I knew of online doing this kind of stuff when I was that age. So it is interesting, yeah, now kind of knowing that it might, you know, be that they see that and go, oh, I can do comedy in this way, or I can
Yeah.
do something like this.
And I think that sort of sums up what, because I know you wouldn't say it, because I know you're far too humble of a person to try and assist it, but you're becoming a role model, especially in that community. And I know you're cringe at the idea of even thinking that, but it's true, you are, and there's no doubt about it. Um, it's all right, I think we lost connection there for a second. Um, I think yeah, there's no doubt about it, and with that being said, there's obvious reason as to why you're getting these different accolades and awards that you're being or nominated for and such. I mean, you went to, if I'm right in thinking, you've been to, was it Fringe Festival you went to?
Yeah, so yeah, last year did the Edinburgh Fringe. I've been doing like fringes in other places for quite a long time, but Edinburgh is kind of the big the big one for
Yeah.
comedy. And, yeah, I kind of have wanted to do it for years, and it was like sort of finally was kind of the right time and managed to like it's I can't really express enough how much I was so well supported in doing it, and like had was really lucky to get like some funding from a couple of different places, um and actually like it's a funny thing because I think I really wanted to do it, like I said, kind of straight out of the clown school that I went to. I really wanted to immediately do my Edinburgh debut and kind of very quickly launch myself into that. And it did. I get like talking on the pandemic and whatever. I think actually it turned out to be a real godsend in some ways, because the time that instead I took to build up an audience and a kind of sense of momentum around my work before taking it to Edinburgh really meant that I had like the loveliest experience. It's really I like I have to be. It's not like it sounds like total bragging, but I really like I was just really lucky. I kind of hear constant horror stories about people's debuts at Edinburgh Fringe,
Okay.
and that like it's really hard, and you kind of end up just losing a lot of like thousands of pounds and being like really and if you don't have any reputation beforehand, people just don't really know of you, and you don't and you're there for a month doing a show and often not getting very big audiences, and um sometimes having like two or three people in the audience some days, and just having to like really push through. And I kind of went partially expecting that and being like, there are going to be some shows which are really hard, um and then it just wasn't. Like I just was really lucky, and I was really shocked that the show just started like selling out within a few days, and the whole run ended up selling out. And it was just like it was a crazy month. I still kind of feel like it's a dream. There's a part of me that even now is like, that went too well. Like that is not how I think for years I've been like really bigging myself up to do it and being like, it's going to be a really hard month. You're going to have to like really work hard and like flyer every day and get like to just do so much like honestly loads of graft to get
Mm.
audiences to come. And I was kind of ready to be doing loads of like gigs outside of the show itself and like all this stuff to try and get audiences to come. And like yeah, like I say, ended up like having to like throw away flyers and like not like having to like and like ended up like
Wow.
actually I had been booked in to do a lot of like promotional gigs that I ended up just cancelling because I was like, the show is sold out, I can like completely chill actually.
Wow.
And yeah, it was a really crazy, it was like a really really crazy month that I like couldn't have foreseen, honestly.
Wow. And you say you got lucky. You didn't get lucky. You got talented, and that's the difference. And again, in that vein, then more recently, you said there was the Fringe Festival, and then you went to the New Comedy Awards, BBC New Comedy Awards. Is that right? So
Yeah.
what was that like?
Gosh, honestly, I didn't like this is confessional, and if the BBC hear me say it, they're gonna be like, fuck you. But I found it really hard, and it was I found it really hard because I think it's it's a real like stand-up format of a show, and me and my friend Lorna, who is also from the Midlands, she's from Redditch. We we went to the Golier school together. Not we didn't know each other before we went, but we were at the school at the same time. And she's also just done like absolutely massive things in the last like year or so, and she kind of also won. She's won like 5 awards or something in the last year. Like she's just like skyrocketed. Um, and we both she's a kind of character comedian. She does like lots of her show is kind of a mix of loads of characters, and we both found it really hard, that gig, the BBC New Comedy thing, because I think it it's not yeah, it's kind of a trick, like I was saying before about the mainstream. It's kind of a tricky thing where they're not quite ready for like something
Mm.
that is a bit more genre bending and is a bit more like experimental in the way that it's done. And they're very used to the thing being like, okay, you've got 5 minutes, and in those 5 minutes you can, it's a very like with telly, everything is so kind of time is money.
Yeah.
You bash it out and you like you go on stage, do your tight 5 minutes of material, which in itself is such a like stand-up thing, because you're relying on this idea that you can immediately tell people what you look like and what you are, and they will recognize it and then will laugh at everything you say. And I think with anything that's clowny or alternative, it's a little bit more about bringing them into a different world. It's kind of a little bit more about there's a more theatrical element where you are going like, actually, I'm not gonna talk out to you. I'm not going to tell you what to laugh at. I'm going to bring you into my theatrical universe, and you're going to see what's funny in this way.
Mm.
Um, and I just don't know if that can be done in 5 minutes, actually. And there's also like, there's a level of like, in the playfulness of clown, you're trying to find what's funny in a lot of ways while you're on stage. You're kind of trying to meet the audience where they're at a little bit more and go, what do you actually like? What is it that you want me to do? And you know, in a lot of my material, I don't know how long things that I do are going to go. Like it's a thing where if the audience are laughing at something, the really basic rule of clown is just the more, if they're laughing at something, just keep doing it, do it more, like push it as far as it possibly can go, really. And like I say, I just think with the TV thing of it being like, no, 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 you've got 5 minutes, make us laugh, that doesn't suit that thing of being like, I want to try to bring the audience into a different thing a little bit more and change the rhythm of this. And yeah, so
Yeah.
I think we found it really tricky for that reason. It was, you know, they edited it well, and it was like, it was obviously, it's nice to have been on TV and to be able to be like, oh, I was on telly, but it wasn't a very good gig of mine. So
Mm.
I kind of was like, oh, I feel like I've slightly represented my work badly in this way. But I mean, yeah.
But I mean, it's all like they say there's no such thing as bad press and all that kind of thing. But you're right in what you're saying about how it's very stand up format wise, because in the physical comedy, often you're building up to something. It's not
Mm.
always quite as straightforward as here's the lead up, here's the punchline, everybody
Right,
laughs, next one.
right.
It's not like it's a Milton Jones stand-up show where he does 10 minutes of one-liners.
Right,
That's not
right.
what it is. You're building something up, you're getting the audience in a place where you can then make them laugh with what you're doing. It's not
Mm.
quite as easy as here's my
I
joke,
mean, like,
that's funny,
it
everyone
was
laughs.
a really funny, it was a funny night because we all knew the guy who did go through, Jin Hao Lee. He's so funny, and he really like, he absolutely just smashed the gig. And it was like the fact that they like made us wait around for as long as they did to like announce who was going through, when we were all like, we know who's going through, like just let us go home, we already know who's going through. Like, and it is like, he's a really brilliant storyteller. He's a really brilliant, like, he's so great at just playing with timing in a really particular way that worked really well on that night. I find it like a really weird thing with TV, like with live stuff, in that it is like the whole time you're knowing that. I guess there's this thing in comedy where we all know, and it's kind of a weird secret, but we all know it, that you have bad gigs at least like 40% of the time. Like at least 40% of your gigs are gigs where you're like, this audience hate me. They are not my audience, and they don't want what I'm doing tonight. And like, we all, I guess it's weird because we all know that, but it's this thing where with TV, if you've managed to get as far as getting an opportunity on TV, it feels like the people producing it think that you must be just like bulletproof funny all of the time.
Mm.
And I just think the reality is that literally nobody is, no matter what, whether they're doing stand up or clown or whatever they're doing. So it's a really odd like thing where you then have to be like, okay, but you're making telly where there's only one opportunity to kind of make this audience laugh, and if they just don't like what I'm offering, how
Yeah.
is it gonna, I don't know, are you gonna edit it? I mean, and they do edit it very well. Like I say, it's a weird thing where it's also very weird seeing the edit in a lot of those things, because the literal like pacing of TV is so different from live comedy. It's a really different, like, I've heard people who've done like Live at the Apollo and stuff as well saying that they actually you kind of want to have like a weirdly like lukewarm gig. You don't really want to have like a really amazing gig where you're absolutely smashing it, because the rhythm of that isn't quite the right rhythm for TV comedy. It's, I don't know, there's lots of weird, like, it's a science in itself,
Yeah.
I think. But it's like a weird like thing where, yeah, the pace of it is very different. So watching yourself in an edit where they've edited your, I mean, I've done the same bit that I did on BBC New Comedy is a bit that I've been doing at like most gigs for about 2 years. So it was a really weird thing to see that same bit with slightly edited timing, and with like where I was like, that's not my timing. That isn't how I do that bit. Like
Mm.
that's not like where the laugh is, I don't think. But they've edited it so that that is where the laugh is, and that's like,
Right.
yeah, it's very strange to like see how TV works in that way.
Yeah, I mean, comedies as a whole is very subjective. Something that one person finds hilarious, the other person finds offensive or not funny at all, and that's all part and parcel of the world that you're in, I suppose, and that not everyone's going to like it, and that's okay, and we just accept it and move on and focus on the ones that do like it, I suppose.
Yeah. I mean, I feel I'm very, I think compared to other people doing clown, I often feel really lucky because I do have this other skill. It's a nice thing where luckily I think the ventriloquism is for me a bit of a cheat in some ways. It does mean that people can leave, and even if they're like subjectively that wasn't funny to me, they sort of have to be like, but objectively he has a good skill. He objectively he could not move his mouth, so that's good, I guess. Um,
Yeah,
so it's
definitely, it's
sort of
another
yeah.
another string to your bow, isn't it? It's something else that you can say, look, you might not like the first bit, but look, now I'm doing this, and you can't find that not funny.
Yeah,
It's
you can't not
it,
find that impressive at least.
yeah, exactly, yeah. And then just finally going on to give a chance to do a bit of a plug for yourself. You've got the Chortle Awards coming up. Is that right?
Yeah, yeah, been nominated for Best Variety Act, which again is like, I mean, like I say, it's that I'm not competitive, and uh, like everyone on the list is someone that I'm friends with, in a couple of cases, like very good friends with. So it's a really weird like thing to be nominated for, and to be like, oh no, that's like now I'm having to compete with my friends for this like thing. But like, yeah, it's a really nice list to even be on, and they're like. My friend Julia, who's on that list, I saw her show recently, and it was like the best show that I have seen in like 2 years. So I'm very happy to lose to either her or Lorna, who also is an absolute sensation. They're like, yeah, it's like a crazy list to even be on.
Yeah, I mean, it's just testament to the fact of how far you've come and how much success you're actually having. And I feel like this is just the beginning. I feel like this is still very much early stages of where it's going to get to, and I hope, in all sincerity, that's what happens. If you'd like to, I'll get a few links off you, and for anyone watching, I'll put the links in the description of this video.
Yeah,
Feel
yeah.
free to go and have a look at some of Lachlan's content and give him a vote. Give him a vote on the Chortle Awards. Thanks very much, everyone, for watching. It's been great. Lachlan, thank you very much for coming on. It's been a pleasure speaking to you.
Thank you.
And yeah, I'll see you next time.